Are you a business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
Today's guest is Dr. Karen Jacobson, a business strategist, human potential expert, and CEO of Aligned Leadership Consulting. With a unique background as a champion ballroom dancer, a doctor of chiropractic medicine, and a military veteran, Karen brings a powerful blend of precision, resilience, and energy to everything she does. Through her work with organizations across industries, she helps leaders build cohesive, high-performing teams rooted in trust, communication, and accountability. Whether through talent assessments, executive coaching, or strategic facilitation, Karen helps teams amplify their human capital potential and creates cultures where people thrive and perform at their best. Karen, welcome to the conversation.
Great to see you, Lisa. And first of all, in advance, thank you for having me here. It's an honor.
Absolutely my pleasure. What you do today is so important, and how it feeds and plays off of disruption and drives innovation.
We're in a world that's filled with change. And my philosophy is if we don't move with the change, we're left behind. One of somebody that both you and I know very well say, adapt, change, or die. And behind that is that it doesn't matter what age we are. It doesn't matter what field we're in. There is always going to be change, and the disruptors, those that are able to move with the change further forward, are the ones that are going to lead the pack. I was always at the front of it.
You have been doing this naturally since you were a kid. With the work that you're doing with teams and organizations, what is that impact that you're trying to make? How are you using your passion to make that an impact in the business world?
A lot of what I do comes from my background. As I said, I mentioned I grew up in Israel. I've been through 3 wars. I was a commander in military intelligence. And it shaped my life. It shaped the way I think. It shaped the way I act. And it shaped the way that I deliver information. And the aspect of being proactive and always having a plan in advance is how I approach team development, how I approach business development, how I approach strategic planning when I work with organizations. And most of the organizations that I work with are really high stakes organizations. I was a math protege, so I can have a side of me that has been, as a kid, a bit of a geek, and I get to speak and to really be able to understand them. And having that other aspect of the strong side of leadership, being able to pull them in the direction. So I work with a lot of organizations, whether they're hard hat organizations like construction and power and energy and manufacturing, or working with government. A lot of those organizations are going to have people that are big thinkers. Very often there are going to be more, I wouldn't necessarily use recluse, but more introverted. And working with that aspect of really leading the pack, they might have ideas, but behavior-wise, that's a challenge for them very often to kind of move out and lead the pack. So being able to pull them out of their shell and move them out of their comfort zone so that they can create a different type of leadership team, so they can create a different type of culture, is really where I come.
And that is hugely important, because the big thinkers who are quiet, who don't step into those leadership roles, often become highly frustrated and disenfranchised and feel not valued. And it is something that through their skills and capabilities that they can grow, and to have somebody like you who can see that potential and take them through that journey to, in my words, help them get out of their own way, is probably career changing for some of those individuals.
Without a doubt. What you were saying just brought to mind a story of one of our clients where I had one interaction. So one of the things we do is when we go into organizations, we'll do behavioral assessment so that we can help them focus and hone on their strengths. And I've done a debrief with somebody who is an employee owner in one of my clients' organization, a young man in the early part of his career, and he was struggling with the role. He was sitting in a role of a project engineer, and just whether it was the language barrier, whether it was personal thought process, whatever it might have been, he just felt like he was not fitting in. Now, he had been there a year and didn't know what to do. After our conversation, he sat down, looked at what his strengths were and looked at what possibility was. And he ended up shifting into scheduling. Just a week ago, I ran into him and he said to me, "Hey, Doc, I need to thank you because what you did changed the trajectory of my entire career." He goes, "I am so happy in the job that I'm doing. I am feeling that this is just a perfect fit for me."
What is it about you? Where does the passion come from? And how are you using that in your work to help solve problems?
It's funny because passion is an interesting thing, but it comes from a love. And to be honest, I love people and I love seeing people excel. And I believe that each and every one of us has a huge potential. It may not always be in the fields that we think. It may not be always in the field that our boss wants us to have. But there's always some gift, some talent, something that each and every one of us has that we can create a path in life. And I've always felt that if I have the ability to have a conversation with an individual and kind of reach in and find out where that lies, help them bring that out, even if they're scared, step out of their comfort zone so that they can really shine and be all they can be. And they don't have to be in the Army Reserve for that.
That's awesome. Yes, please. You don't have to be in the Army Reserve to find your potential, tap into it, and actually achieve. I'll use different language. I'll take it back to Greek philosophy. Actualize your potential. It's one of my favorite phrases, and that's been in my head since middle school. If all we strive to do every day is to actualize our potential, what an amazing world we would live in if everybody did that.
Well, that is one of human needs.
It is. It absolutely is, and something that I don't know that everybody thinks about enough because we get stuck in a rut of what we do day in and day out, right? That routine, which is also something that we as humans fall into. But when we challenge that, that's when those changes, those shifts, the paradigm shifts actually happen. You shared one story with us about that individual and the change of career path and the satisfaction that he got out of that. Talk to me a little bit about an engagement where it was ugly and messy and hard, because that's where people learn the most. What are some, tell me a challenging story, something that challenged you.
Well, I've got challenges that I had on a personal level when I had made my career shift. And let me tell you, that was not pretty. My previous career, I was a chiropractor, and there came a point had a television show here, and my love for speaking and wanting to be on stage and have, in a way, a bigger impact really propelled me to move forward. And I made a career shift. And within that career shift, it took 2 years. I got a buyer for the business and I signed the contract and I was waiting for the deposit. The landlord released me from the lease because, a month early, because I only really had 2 months left. And I'm waiting for the deposit and I hear crickets. And my broker says, "Hey, Karen, the deposit, you should be getting the deposit today, hearing from the guy." Well, it turns out somebody else got their deposit. I called the guy and he was kind of hemming and hawing. And he said, "Well, one of my friends reached out to me and had some issue with the family and would like me to look at his practice because he has to move out of state. So give me a couple of days to think about it." I'm going to tell you, it was April 23rd, and it was 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and I felt like my world had caved. Interestingly, things that ran through my mind, I thought of how people felt when financial industry, when the world went into depression back in 1929, and the things that people did, because I literally at that point felt like the bottom had opened up and caved everything. And it took me about 15, 20 minutes to just catch my breath. And here's where my shift was. I had already been trained in neurolinguistic programming. That is a specific science that deals with communication and the way the duplication of excellence. So I had around me some experts. And I called a friend. I asked somebody to walk me through hypnotherapy and meditation and whatever it might have taken so I can ground myself. Because I had 4 days after my broker reached out to him. I had 4 days where my broker said, "Oh yeah, this is like 80% in your boat." And I'm like, I don't think so. Just my gut told me no. And ultimately, it was a big no, which led to losing the sale, attempting to make a fire sale, and having to reinvent what I'm doing and what my exit would be. And I immediately had to move into action. And I called a colleague that was down the block that I did not know and said, "Can I have a conversation with you? Can we meet?" And a month later, I moved what was left of my patients, of the records and everything into a couple of spare rooms in her office. See, the aspect of change and disruption, no matter how ugly it might be, is not about what do you do when you're sitting in it. It's what do you do to get out of it. And I will admit there was a year and a half that I still ran a business, running my practice, running some of my consulting and coaching side, and attempting to build the speaking side. And I was in the back of an office, in offices that were dark, and it was a dark night in my soul. I also had split up from a relationship at the same time. It felt just like everything was caving in. But it was about moving forward and finding those points of light that you can look at that challenge and attempt to find the opportunity.
That is a really powerful story from a business perspective, from a personal life journey perspective. And in that, the mindset of when everything goes absolutely the wrong way, right? This was a perfect storm of bad things. The first, number one, most important thing in that was finding the next step to take. That paralysis, indecision, and stopping equals the end. And for listeners out there, that is Karen's first gem of the day. When it all feels like it's too much, take the moment, catch your breath, get your bearings, take a next step. May not be the perfect next step, but the motion is important, and to keep moving gives you the ability to think through, to challenge what's happening, and find other solutions.
That happens to be also when you say that, find that calm. So I call it common centered. That is one of the points in my keynote when I share the story, when I talk about what it really means to build alignment, and that aspect of coming back from the adversity and the chaos and the trauma and the disasters. Is the first step is stop, breathe, find your common center.
And it's so important to do that physically, emotionally, right? Breath is life. And if we don't actually take the moment to breathe, we're making decisions panic based and oxygen deprived.
Not only that, but that is one of the first rules and they call that in emotional intelligence, they call that amygdala hijack, which means it's the center in your brain that is responsible for logical thinking actually shuts down. And emotion and logic don't necessarily live in the same space. And so if I'm filled with emotion, I can't make logical decisions. It's calm, center, breathe, step back as a situation so that we can make an informed decision and make the right decision for that moment until the next step.
In that story you shared with us without necessarily intentionally meaning to, right? That you're sharing a story from 2015. It is now 2025. Congratulations on building a business over a decade. Entrepreneurs, we know the rules. Most businesses fail in that first year. So Karen, talk to me about a decade in. You've built, and what you started to build in 2015 and what you're doing today, I'm going to guess are not exactly the same thing. Tell me a little bit about your journey.
Far from it. As I said, the 2015 exit, and I was actually thinking about that early today because it was a different direction. And when I actually started building an exit back in 2012. And that was when I built the side of the coaching and the business development. And that was more with individuals, with entrepreneurs. And when I exited, I ended up doing a stint on the road for about a year and a half with a professional development company as an independent contractor. And attempting to build my business at the same time. And the challenge in that was the fact that they had me, I was on the road 3 weeks a month. And if anyone's ever done a stint like that, even if you're going for a weekend traveling, but this was deliver a 6-hour program daily and then either fly or drive to the next location. And that could be a minimum of a 5-hour drive. And so the week of the month that I was home, it was really hard to build anything moving forward. So really what I focused on is honing my skills as far as being in front of audience, facilitating events, training, my speaking side. That's when I obtained my professional status with the National Speakers Association. And at the end of that, middle of 2017 was when I started getting some of my own events. And I remember getting, talk for working for someone else. I got a pushback from the training company when I gave them 5 months notice. Well, we have you scheduled in Phoenix. I'm like, mm-hmm. And I have an event in Phoenix that's 2 hours, and I will be probably making about what I would make in 10 days, in 2 weeks, in 2 hours, my own event. And so I ended up leaving. And that's when phase 2 of a challenge came up, which at building a business is not easy. By the same token, it's about looking at what is the bigger goal? Where do I want to go? And how am I going to manage the challenges along the way? And if you are really passionate about what you're doing, you'll figure out a way to overcome. Because that middle wasn't pretty. I had moved from leaving that. The next step was in 2019. I was at a point where the business wasn't strong enough. I was still carrying debt from the loss of the sale and the practice. And I ended up going through a bankruptcy, which was phase 2.
And
And
now,
as challenging as that was, where it hit my identity. It felt like I was a failure, and having to pick up from that. Here's the interesting thing: when I finally took the step and met with the lawyer and filed the paperwork, a week later, contracts started coming in. I signed a contract for an international speaking tour in Canada for 2 weeks. So you never know what lies around the corner. And even if there's a challenge and you're willing and ready to step into it and take those risks and take those chances, what might lie on the other side when you are also doing the right thing.
and it's a beautiful illustration of how we can be held back by things that we don't even understand and realize that they're holding us back. And when we step away from them through something as traumatic as, nobody wants to have to go through a bankruptcy, but what was released and allowed you to then look entirely in a new direction and embrace it holistically, there was a freedom that came from that, I have to imagine, that gave you the ability to say yes to so many new things. And you've built on that over the last 5 years. So now, where is the aligned leadership consulting? What does the business look like today?
So that was actually the point where I made a big shift from individual and micro businesses to really working with government, working with bigger industries, with bigger organizations, and starting to really build from getting a gig here, getting a there, to getting multi-year contracts.
And that's
And
a game changer for business consultants.
without a doubt. Without a doubt. And by the way, for those listening out there, it's not about a game changer because of the fact that, oh, there's security. It's about the impact that we can make, about the change that we can drive. When I'm sitting with a client that I probably been one of my clients that started where they had a goal, and their 3 to 5 year goal was to triple or quadruple. They wanted to double within 12 months. That was their 12-month goal. We started working together. They doubled in 5 months, 7 months ahead of their goal. They have since doubled again. and the impact that they have on the industry right now, the changes that this organization has, and that growth, by the way, while being able to maintain the culture, the family feeling, even though they have now been more than triple of where they started. Now, did they lose a couple of people on the way? Yes, because here's the interesting thing. When you're on the path, people will also excuse themselves if they're not a right fit.
Karen, if you've piqued the interest and curiosity from members of the audience, how do they learn more about you or Aligned Leadership Consulting?
So we are branded mostly under Dr. Karen Jacobson, whether it's the website, whether it's X or Facebook or Google Place, whatever it might be. There's a lot of information on the website. Stay tuned because this podcast will be listed on the website as well. We actually are going through again, we talk about change and disruption, Lisa. So we are going through a brand elevation right now. So stay tuned. Even if you visit now, there will be a new website, new media, new information coming out, especially that will highlight some of the things that we are doing now because our menu of services is much more robust. We now have people that I've added to my team. That has really been the opportunity to grow and scale and build the business. And one of the things about that is that when you are sitting in the right space, things just open up and they happen.
They absolutely do. And in our conversation today, Dr. Karen has shared with us the importance of starting with a plan in advance. Business is high stakes, and it is important that we understand our people, and especially sometimes it's those introverted, quiet, big thinkers that need to be given a little nudge in the right direction so that they can step out of their comfort into their opportunity to achieve or actualize their potential. Because that's where we all make our biggest contributions when we're doing the things that we're meant to be doing. To a point that she just made, sometimes that means stepping away from one role into another or one organization to another. One of the points that she made very poignantly for me was that there is a time and a place when it is important to stop, breathe, find your calm and your center. We do not make good business decisions from a point of emotion. And when we take those, even if it's 30 seconds to find that calm and centered, we make much better decisions. Karen, thank you for sharing your journey with us. And audience members, you know my rules. Don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show.